Hey everybody, welcome to the Biz STL podcast. I'm your host, Mike Miller. The Biz STL podcast is where we meet with leaders from around St. Louis to learn more about how they built their businesses, what they see for the future of St. Louis's business scene, and how some of their greatest lessons just might serve as learning opportunities for your own career. This episode of the Biz STL podcast is presented by Opera Theater of St. Louis. When was the last time you shared a hug with someone? Hugs are powerful. They can reduce stress, connect us to the people we care about, and, for just a few moments, make us feel like everything is going to be all right. Maxine Clark founded Build-A-Bear with the idea that we always need something to hug. And now, with Delmar DivINe, Clark is giving a metaphorical hug to the West End neighborhood in St. Louis, providing housing, community services, space for nonprofits, and a whole lot more. On today's episode, we chat with Maxine Clark about the impact she's striving to make with the Delmar DivINe, lessons from her career, and some of the things that excite her about St. Louis's business community. As the founder of Build-A-Bear, she's a retail innovator, and as the CEO of the Clark Fox Family Foundation, which supports development in St. Louis through investments in education, public health, entrepreneurship, and so many other areas, she's a steward for St. Louis's future. There's a lot we can take from Maxine about not only starting a successful business, but giving back. All that and more when we return. Hang tight. We'll be right back. Experience an unforgettable night at one of St. Louis's cultural gems. Opera Theater of St. Louis's annual festival season is back with 4 new productions and hundreds of artists handpicked from all across the country. A night at the opera is more than just a world-class show. From pre-show garden picnics to post-show champagne toasts under the stars, Opera Theater offers a vibrantly social take on a classic arts experience. Come be a part of the story. Learn more about Opera Theater's current season at experienceopera.org. Welcome back. Maxine, it's so nice to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, before we get started, there's so much I want to talk to you about today, but we always start with a rapid-fire round of questions. I'll ask you just a few brief questions that you can answer in just a few words, and we'll get to know you just a little bit better. One question I start with every podcast is, how do you like to start your day?
I get up in the morning and I kind of walk around the house just to kind of wake up. And then I go upstairs and get ready to go to work, put on makeup, get dressed, have a cup of coffee. My husband is a wonderful cook and he makes me breakfast and I'm pretty much ready to go.
That's great. Do you have a standard breakfast that you start with?
Sometimes he'll make me I usually like scrambled eggs and a half of a low-carb bagel. And a cup of coffee and some apple juice or orange juice or something like that. And it gets me going, and it's kind of predictable and good.
Love a classic, cozy breakfast.
Yes.
Start. That's
breakfast is my favorite. I'd prefer to go out to the pancake house or something, but I'd have to get out of the house first.
That's great. What's something that folks may not know about you? This could be a hidden talent or just something that we don't know.
I love to write. I've been keeping a journal since I was a small girl. Started that because I grew up in the times of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I had just read as a little girl The Diary of Anne Frank, and I was worried that the same thing could happen in America at that time, living in Miami, Florida. So I started keeping a journal so if anything happened to me, that somebody might find it. So now I just do it for the fun of it. But when I was in high school, it was kind of emotional. You'd write down things that you felt about your friends or boyfriends or school or teacher. And when I go back to read it now, I can pick a day like March 8th, 1967, and I will find myself doing something very similar. At that time, like in high school, I was the editor of the high school newspaper, so I wasn't doing a podcast, but I might have been doing an interview.
That's great. And I know you majored in journalism at the University of Georgia, correct?
Yes, I did major in journalism, and I loved it. It was a great career prepping me for a career I thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
That's great. Was your mother a lawyer?
No, my mother did not have a college education. She was more of a social worker, but she did work for Eleanor Roosevelt during World War II. She was one of her private traveling secretaries.
Right.
So she had a lot of knowledge gained by living life versus having an education.
Yeah, fascinating background with your mother. It was really interesting.
Amazing person.
Really seems like it. Yeah, absolutely. There's some great photos too of your mother and Eleanor Roosevelt just standing close proximity.
Yes.
Your mother was a real firebrand herself.
She was definitely a small but mighty person.
Well, steering it back to St. Louis, do you have a favorite restaurant here locally? Favorite restaurant or restaurants?
Our 2 favorite restaurants are The Crossing and Dominic's Trattoria in Clayton. They're really close by. We go often, and I love the great service. I learn a lot from those 2 restaurants because of their great service model. and they're great food, but really it's the people that make a difference. The food's good, but the people that make it a special experience. And I love to go where people value your business and they also seem to love their work.
How about a favorite book? Anything you've read recently or just all time that you might recommend to
The book
listeners?
I've read recently that I really like, and I keep opening it up to different chapters, is a book by David Brooks called How to Know a Person. And I think at COVID, we kind of got away from some of the, seeing people and meeting strangers and knowing, asking a question about somebody. But that book is really fantastic. And it is the way I've always been. My father was a salesman. My mother was an untrained but still social worker. So they were people. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to ask personal questions or ask questions about people. And I found out in his book that, oh, yes, you can do that. In fact, you need to do that because that's how you get to know someone. It's a great book, actually.
How about podcasts? Is there anything that you typically like to listen to?
I listen to a lot of political podcasts, staying up to date on what's going on in the world, all across the world. I listen to Claire McCaskill, local person. She has a podcast with Jennifer Palmieri, and it's really good. I listen to some come up that they're not coming to me right now, but some that come up about women's issues and women's success stories. Young people, young business people. I listen to Guy Raz. He has a lot of great stories about entrepreneurs. And there's always something new that's out there that, catches my attention. I try to listen to as many and read as many books as I possibly can just to stay informed. But it's almost impossible because there's so much out there that's good to listen to and read.
And last question for you. Do you have a life hack? Maybe something that just makes your life just a little bit easier?
The only one I can think of right now is one of the reasons I created the Delmar DivINe, which was I was spending, once I retired from Build-A-Bear, I spent so much time driving around, meeting with all these nonprofits, trying to get a handle on what our challenges were in St. Louis and why we were so fragmented. And I realized that they're all over the place, 26,000 of them. How do you get to all of them? And so one of the reasons I created the Delmar DivINe was to make it easier for people to come together to work on our opportunities in St. Louis.
Read my mind. I want to start with the Delmar DivINe. Let's jump right in. It's been open for a little over a year now, I believe. And it's offered a wealth of services. It's presented some affordable housing options to folks in the West End. It's a home for nonprofit. Food, I mean, you name it. It does it all over there at the Delmar DivINe. How do you assess the impact of the whole operation a little more than a year in?
Actually, we're over 2 years in.
Is it 2?
Yeah, we opened up. We started moving in winter of 21, but most people moved in 2022.
Got it.
And then in July of 2022, we had that crazy flood, and we had to sort of start all over again. People stayed in the building still, but we had to, make some adjustments. And then we're full. I mean, there's not many office spaces in St. Louis that are 100% occupied.
Wow.
And we have 150 apartments, and they're also occupied. And with all of our retail spaces that we created, which wasn't what I wanted more, but that was all that faced Delmar, are been occupied. So it's really making a multifaceted impact. We brought more housing, affordable housing, not affordable in the sense that it's low income, although some of it is, a proportion is. It's that it was a little bit below market rate, and wonderful apartments, brand new, even though it's in an old building, brand new apartments. Things that people needed in the community, like a bank. We did a lot of research. We talked to a lot of people. I had the idea after Michael Brown was killed in 2014, and in the spring of 2015, I found this building, and I was, took till 2022 to get it open. So I would say that that's a long time. Build-A-Bear was 9 months from idea to reality. This was much more complicated, but I was talking to a lot more people, and they were giving me a lot of feedback, and that's how we got to, we needed a bank, we needed urgent care, we needed a pharmacy, we needed a restaurant, something casual that people could go to. And they just said restaurant, and then I went specific. What kind of restaurant? And deli was by far and away, because I think people view a deli, it's a kind of a universal concept of a place to have breakfast or lunch. And it's been really successful, and people come from all over St. Louis. And that was another objective, was to bring people back to this part of town that at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century was a very international community. So people moved out west, kept going further west, and they came to see the deli, and they go, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was here. It was like really a big, gigantic surprise. And I wanted it to be that. I wanted people to be pleasantly surprised by what they would find in St. Louis. The other is the security impact that we've had, the safety and security. Our zip code is a relatively low crime zip code in the city of St. Louis, believe it or not. But we still have been tracking it since the day we started construction. We put in all the months before we started, and then we looked at when we started, and it kept coming down, down, down. And most of it is just petty, crime. People break into somebody's car, and not high on the physical harm at all, thank goodness. But we've watched it come down, 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 and because there's so many people every day, 1,000 people come and go in this building. It was empty for a decade, basically. That brings, people watching out for each other, neighbors seeing each other. Oh, hi, how are you? And if anybody's up to any kind of, nonsense, they're going to see them and they're going to report it. And honestly, during the construction, I had neighbors call me and say, it looks like somebody's trying to get in that front door. You might want to call the police, or they were noticing. And that made me really happy because, number one, that showed they cared about what we were doing and they valued it and they cared about me. And that is, wonderful. That part of the friendships that I've made in the last 10 years.
It's such an awesome project. And I had the pleasure of touring Delmar DivINe actually last March, I believe. I was writing a feature for St. Louis Magazine and got to see it all. I got to see some of the units. I got to walk around and it was buzzing. And it was really cool because the West End neighborhood, like you mentioned, there's so much history. It's a rich history. And unfortunately, I think when we talk about the West End, people automatically assume the Central West End. But the West End is a distinct and different neighborhood. And there's a lot of history there. And it feels like I said, it's a buzzing avenue right now of people and neighbors, and it's just life. It's great.
Closer to the opening, we hired a WashU student who was a history major, and she helped me a lot dig into the history of the project beforehand. But that summer that she was there, we interviewed a lot of people who grew up in the West End, and many of them moved from Mill Creek when Mill Creek was closed down, and they had a lot. They were children, and they talked about all the fun things that children talk about. And always the common denominator was church or synagogue, food, velvet frieze, which I never knew a velvet frieze because when I moved to St. Louis, there were no velvet friezes, or at least I never saw one. There were several on Delmar, so people would, could walk to the ice cream. They had an ice skating rink on de Bolivar, the Winter Garden ice skating rink. People talked about it, black or white, young or old. They had all these memories. And those are the memories that all of us have of our neighborhood growing up. The little things that we did when we did with our friends. Flint Fowler grew up in this neighborhood. Ken Kransberg, Andy Taylor was born in this hospital, and his sister Joanne Kendall. There's so many people that have such strong memories, positive memories, and you could have that memory. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I have similar memories in my neighborhood. Those are the things that bring that we should be talking about more, is so that people realize this is a great place to raise a family. Whether you want to live north, south, east, or west, we have all kinds of housing and opportunities and neighborhood choices that you can have, which I don't know. Miami was a much bigger place. I don't know that my parents thought about it like that when they were able to buy this house, our house in our neighborhood on the GI Bill for a very low cost relative to what houses were starting to cost after the war. So here that people came to these big, beautiful homes and loved them and wanted to keep them in their family for generations. The challenge is that neighborhood structure changed and laws changed, or laws got more instituted than they may have been prior to that. And when people went to fix their house up because, they needed a new roof now, they lived there for 20 years, or they needed a tuck pointing, they couldn't get a loan from a bank because their house had been undervalued now. And so that was really sad to me. Beautiful, beautiful. I call them Meet Me in St. Louis homes that are just still, capable of being made into the homes that they once were. But many of them deteriorated so much that they've been torn down. And that is really sad. We have pictures of the hospital looking back into the neighborhood, and you can see the beautiful homes that were behind it. Visitation Academy used to be behind it. Now it's a park. The most expensive apartments in St. Louis at that time, called the Churchill Apartments, which had a formal apparel store on the main floor and a jewelry store like the Simons of the 1900s down there, and a drugstore in the back. And imagine that. And now it's a low-income housing apartment, which is very nice, but it's not what it once was. And so it's hard to remember. Also, Country Day School started in that neighborhood. So a lot of things were there, but they just kept moving west.
Well, it's interesting because this project, it feels very you, and it feels like a hug to this neighborhood. And I know hugs are big for you. It goes back to, the whole idea behind Build-A-Bear, but this feels like a hug for the West End. This is something that really brings a lot of people together.
Yeah, it is. And it's very important to me because I'm not from St. Louis. I came from Washington, D.C., where I was working, and I bought a house in Lafayette Square, and because I couldn't afford a house like that in Washington, D.C., even then. And I love the history. I did a study of the people that lived in the house before, way before me, and the neighborhood. And I said, boy, look at all these. I'm from Coral Gables, Florida. The history was sort of Spanish history. And what a beautiful city. We had so many beautiful homes. And yeah, there were some challenges, but like every city has that. I wasn't, daunted by that. In fact, people say, you live in Lafayette Square. Are you afraid? I said, what would I be afraid of? If people don't tell you, you don't know, and you're not really worried about it. Half of our problems are that we're so suspicious. And you should be aware, but there's a difference between being aware of your surroundings. I never felt unsafe in Lafayette Square, and I loved it. And then when I met my husband and we got married, he lived in Clayton, so we moved there. But I would say that I loved going in the Central West End. I could have bought a house in Portland Place for $45,000, but I couldn't afford the upkeep. I couldn't afford to redo it. And I bought the house for much less than that in Lafayette Square at the time. So, but that same house, well, I shouldn't say the same house. That house that I bought, I'm sure the inside is significantly different, is recently sold for $650,000. And I didn't even with 100 for 100. I had what I put into it because you had to restore it outside first and then the inside. And that was just a great personal experience for me. I love history. And I think St. Louis doesn't, people that are from here may not always appreciate, they always ask me, oh, you're from Miami. Why did you come to St. Louis? Didn't you love the weather down there? I said, no, I love the change of seasons. There's so many good things that you get to have here. But the history was significant to me, to restore it, to be proud of our history, to be aware of the things that weren't so good in our history. Let's not do that anymore. And the history, St. Luke's Hospital had tons of relics of their history that I could, dig into. And we learned a lot about St. Louis.
It's a really interesting idea. Just as you mentioned, all of the services, the way it houses so many different nonprofits. There's so many great organizations that are doing work at the Delmar DivINe. I wanted to ask you about good ideas, because when we think about some of the things you've been behind, whether it's Build-A-Bear or Delmar DivINe, or really any number of different ventures and initiatives, specifically Build-A-Bear, I find it so interesting when we think about the origin story. You're taking your neighbor's daughter out to go shopping, and they're out of Beanie Babies, and this idea pops in your head, and here you are with Delmar DivINe. You're out for a drive, and you just happen to take a different route and see the hospital, and the idea pops in your mind. When we think about good ideas, how do we recognize a good idea? What does it take to actually recognize a good idea and then act on it?
Well, good ideas are staring us in the face every day, because if you talk to people and have conversations on an airport or at your place of work, somebody will say something to you that I wish they did this, or why don't they do that? And you go, wow, that's a great idea. Why don't you turn that into a business? And most people say, oh, no, what? But that's not me. I'm always thinking about when I hear something is broken or has an opportunity to be fixed, I want to go do that, or find somebody to do it, meaning give somebody else that idea and take it into a business idea, because that's what a new product does. It fills a void that wasn't there before. I didn't invent teddy bears. Ray Kroc didn't invent hamburgers. So I always tell college students too that out on the college campus, if you all looked up instead of always had your headsets on, you would see what's missing. Like there's somebody walking with a backpack that's falling off their arms. Is that do we have the perfect backpack? Could we invent the perfect backpack? I still haven't found the perfect luggage or the perfect handbag, or I just haven't gotten to those ideas yet. But I think that using that same entrepreneurial mindset, my curiosity is my superpower, is how I came to Delmar DivINe. I was at Cortex. I love Cortex. My idea was really Cortex for nonprofits. I didn't think of Cortex, but once I saw it, I said, how else could we apply this? And I think that's one of our biggest opportunities in St. Louis. We have many successful entities here. Are we looking at how we can expand them? And like Grand Center is fantastic. It hasn't always been as big as it is now. It keeps growing, but they put 9 PBS there and the NPR station there. It really is a center of arts and thought and leadership. And it's wonderful to take people there. How can we build more of these? One of my ideas that I've been dealing with for quite a long time is the first 2 women millionaires were from St. Louis, Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone. And they happened to have been Black businesswomen in the cosmetic business and created amazing hair care products for the Black customer. And we should be celebrating that and bringing all of the Black beauty entrepreneurs that exist in America to St. Louis, because you can ship your products from here much more efficiently. We have all of this science around here if you want to experiment and come up with new products. And I'm working on a location to put that here in St. Louis, hopefully somewhere in the Ville. because I believe that while I'm a little bit behind the times because I was working on this project, I've been looking at and investing in, and even Arch France has brought several companies, Black leaders who created beauty businesses that are doing quite well here in St. Louis. Why not? And why don't we think about other ways that we were stars? And we did first. We have ice cream. I think the ice cream cone was invented. We have Clementines, which is a great, great brand of ice cream. And I know she's growing. It's delicious, and she's growing in St. Louis, but then she'll grow nationwide. How do we do more of that? What do we win at? And how do we blow that up? We had Tina Turner. We had great musicians. We had unbelievable, passionate civil rights leaders here. Lots of history. Like in the neighborhood of the West End, there were synagogues and churches and Catholic churches, all right, like in a corner. We have 7 Holy Corners on Kings Highway, not too far from us. This was how we lived, right across from our neighbors. We went every Sunday. People were probably waving at each other that were totally different religions. How can we bring that out, that kind of community that we had back to St. Louis and then bring people here because that's how they want to live? I went to the University of Georgia and also got some time to spend on the Olympics as an alumni of University of Georgia. And what I loved is what I learned from Billy Payne, who was the creator of making Atlanta what it is today. In my opinion, it came mostly after the Olympics. And he thought about everything forward. Like, if we're going to build a building for the Olympics and it's going to be right next to Georgia Tech, or it's going to be next to Morehouse, what do they want it to be? What are they missing? What do they need? And how we make that building fit the future, not what we need for a short time for the Olympics. And I think I naturally thought that way, but I thought, what a brilliant way to think. And that's kind of what I've been thinking all the time is, what was it and what can we make it into? In his case, they didn't exist. But Atlanta has a West End also, and that happens to be where all of the very exclusive Black neighborhood is, and also the universities of Morehouse College, Clark University, and Spelman College. And we could have that here in St. Louis. We have all these great universities, may not all be HBCUs, but we have diverse universities here. How can we welcome more people from more lands and more places with more ideas that we can actually nurture here, because it's way affordable to live here, much more so now than Atlanta, by the way.
Well, that leads me right into my next question for you. I was going to say, we talk a lot about challenges here in St. Louis, and there are many of them, and I think those are valuable conversations, but also sometimes maybe it gets lost, the opportunities that are here. And I think you just laid out a few of them right there. I was going to ask you, what are the opportunities that we should be looking at or thinking about here in St. Louis?
Well, I think that we shouldn't be afraid to think about the way other cities have translated their cities into 21st century growing communities. Just because it's just this thing that has to have happened here, it's the show me state. But there are really good ideas in other places. And how do we adapt it? Like the Beltline in Atlanta, a whole group of people are meeting, and have been meeting for months and years on this Beltline in Atlanta, which it wasn't its first project, but it's a current project. How it connects everybody. Connectivity is really important. How it safely connects people. There's just so much opportunity in that to learn from others. When you go on a trip, on vacation, what do you see? And, could you bring it back? Could we have a big suggestion box that you could say, oh, I took these pictures and I'm just submitting them for an idea. I got an idea when I was in Seattle that when you have a pothole in Seattle, they have an app and you take a picture of it and it already knows your GPS. It knows exactly where it is, and you send it and it clicks. It says, thank you for submitting this picture. And within 2 days, it's fixed.
Awesome.
And they put all their time into the people being the finders of and so I do that. I go around and I see, I take a picture of it and I send it to the department, and, or if it's a sinkhole or something like that, because I really believe that's an opportunity for us. It's kind of an easy one. If, when the streets look attractive. Detroit, have you been to Detroit lately? It's a totally different corporate environment in Detroit, but I was in Detroit when it was pretty rough. It is a much more evolved city and a 21st century city, I would say. I don't think they have any more executives that are other than the car industry, more than St. Louis has. I think they've just looked at it as home, and home for everyone, not just home for people that want to enjoy expensive tickets to the sports or theater, or it's really open to the public. And the other is right on the border of Canada. And so they have a lot of international influence also, which I think they learn from their Canadian neighbors, which is really helpful. We could learn a lot from that too. I think also, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but we're working on this in our zip code. Well, actually, in 63101 112 and in 108, which is right next door to us. I think there's a real opportunity for us to create a very healthy, thriving neighborhood for being healthier people, like a blue zone. If you've known about blue zones, they exist mostly in Europe, where people have a whole different healthcare system, a whole different paying for childcare, a whole different paternity leave and maternity leave. They start off with a little bit, they don't make as much money as people in America, but their take-home pay goes a little bit further to more luxuries than healthcare and housing and things like that. So we're working because we have all those ingredients. They have 9 points. We have all those 9 points and all throughout St. Louis, but do we have them in every neighborhood where people can access and be healthier because the streets are smoother, the sidewalks have the right curves, you can ride your bike or roll your wheelchair, whatever you need, parks, libraries, places for people to gather, whether it's religious or community. And I think that those are opportunities in every single neighborhood. And then we're all doing this. I mean, there's lots of these going up around St. Louis. Pastor Alexander in the Nearville, Beverly and Ken Jenkins in Delwood, Kevin Bryant just a few blocks away from me, Jim McKelvey in the Maker District. It's all, you're going to look down east on Delmar and you're going to see a whole different landscape within the next 5 years. Restaurant Row is basically going to be in that Maker District. And I think all these new restaurants that Ben Perem is creating, that Danielle Eichenhorst is doing, there are a lot of really great, we're going to have a lot of fun. And planning these restaurant weeks and doing these activities, I think are going to bring people who didn't think about it and then say, I have an idea now. And that's what it's supposed to be, inspiring all these elders that I've never met in our community that passed long before I came to St. Louis have inspired me to think about making St. Louis what they had hoped it would be, but better.
You've got me fired up. I'm excited now to see some of these potential things come to fruition. I was going to ask you too, along those lines, are there projects? I think you reeled off a couple right there, but are there other projects just around the region that are maybe underway or in the planning stages that really excite you?
Building a neighborhood back to its once prosperous, and prosperous is a word that depends on the people that live there, but I mean, healthy living, grass is growing, people are outside having neighborhood conversations. Those are happening all over St. Louis, actually. And sometimes you wish that we would put them all in one place and then just grow them, and then we'd really see it. But actually, when you drive around, you start to see it. I brought a friend here who worked in Harlem redevelopment. I've known her for a long time, and she's worked there for 10 years, and she came here a few weeks ago, spent a few days here. And we went to every neighborhood you can imagine, from the north tip of the city to the south tip. And she was just blown away. This is what some of this looked like Harlem. You even have a cleaner path to build some of the things that you want. And I already knew that we did. I think that SLDC and the mayor have a real vision. It's a long-term vision. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And they are, when they, looks like they're going to make a decision that, why didn't we build that factory there instead of waiting for it to be retail stores? They're trying to be planful. They're trying to think forward. And it may not be what everybody agrees with, but I think that we have to honor a plan as much as we can. They finally have one. It's a wonderful plan. The Beltline plan is a wonderful plan. It's all together. The plan that we all have that are doing these different neighborhood projects, they all go together. We send each other customers. I couldn't do all of Ben's restaurants in my place. I mean, so he's working with Jim. I can't do all the offices. We're full. But Kevin Bryant is building Elevate in the Fountain Park neighborhood a few blocks away. It's not that far, and we can work together. We were talking about how we can do some events together so that when people can come and go between the two spaces. It's a little further east, but the further east you go, you start to see that, hey, look at the houses that are being built here. Look at the businesses that are here. And then you hit Cardinal Ritter High School and you say, this is our future. All these kids that are getting a great education and going to college, where Delmar sort of crosses over. That's our future, the hope, the children. How do we get them back here? How do we get them seeing that there's this growth that they can participate in? That's what I'm out for, is making sure that the young people that grow up here want to go away and see other things, just like I left my hometown. I didn't come back, but it wasn't because I didn't love Miami, because I found another place to love. And I brought some of the things that I had learned in Miami and in Atlanta to here in Washington, D.C. So we need to be nurturing that young talent. We need to be respecting them. We need to be opening our company doors for summer internships so people can see that now that they've been in college a couple of years, I could do that. and bring them into the work environment. I mean, say, yes, in the summer internship, you're going to work in the work environment, and they're going to build relationships with people, and they're going to work there. That's an old-fashioned idea that needs to come back, because how would we all learn our craft if somebody didn't show us and set an example for us? Not always have to show us every little detail, but at least you see it, you hear it in the hallways, now you learn. And we're missing some of that. But I think our young, particularly our young African-American students that are growing up here in St. Louis, going to the great high schools of St. Louis, can really come back and add a lot of value, as they did in Atlanta. Georgia has the Hope Scholarships. I don't know if you know what that is, but their lottery, when they started with the lottery went 100% to education. In Missouri, it went to education, but if we already had $100 million in the budget, and we just had $100 million from the lottery, we just took the $100 million we budgeted and put it to other things, where Georgia added it. I don't think there's a student that gets accepted to a state university in Georgia that pays more than $1,000 a semester for an incredible college education. Georgia Tech is graduating the most engineers in America, most Black engineers. And Georgia State University, which was like our UMSL, is it's almost as large as most community colleges in big cities. It's so big. Has a law school, and I heard they were opening up a medical school. This is amazing. And Emory is already there, so we can do that. We have the makings of Atlanta, and we were bigger than Atlanta long before Atlanta got the idea to grow up.
There's a lot there. There's a great vision there, though. I think there's a lot of...
When you go to places like that, you see, I was there when it was I used to call it overgrown farm town. And then I saw it as a big city. And when I go back now, I'm just blown away by how diverse it is, how like New York City it is, but it's still smaller than that. And how you can get beautiful neighborhoods and how you can get around. And remember, it was blown up in the Civil War, so they had to build it all over again. And I think that it's a great place. It's inspiring to go to Atlanta. I was at the Atlanta airport, and most people complain about it. I love the Atlanta airport. It's one of the most efficient airports in the world. And you can get anywhere. The plane gets off, you can get to the next plane in minutes. And so I look at that and I say, how did they decide? Why isn't this kind of airport in every city, even on a smaller scale, just so it's so efficient? When you come in there, you say, I want to go back to St. Louis. The airport's great. We're working on that, and I think we'll get there. But they have a lot of things to teach us, as does Nashville, as does Chicago, as does New York, as does many, many cities in the world. And when people fled the cities to go to like Idaho and, Jackson Hole, Wyoming and all that, we have that all close by. You can still live in a big metropolitan area and still have a country life if you want it. Go live at it, have a weekend home in Innsbruck that you can afford. We might not have beaches, but we have some really nice places to go for respite.
Absolutely. Well, this is my last question, and you sort of touched on it right there. I was going to say, you mentioned some of the things we could possibly learn from Nashville or Chicago, Detroit, and Atlanta, other cities all around the country and even the world. What are some things that maybe those cities can learn from us? Is there anything that we're doing well, anything that we are perhaps a leader in that other cities should be saying, hey, let's look at what St. Louis is doing. This is really cool and innovative, and I think we could maybe learn something from them.
I think that one of our best attributes of St. Louis is what we've done in sports. Really done a great job. And sports is a wonderful way to bring people together. Now, I'm a basketball person, so I'm a big college basketball person. But if we had a professional basketball team here, which I think we will eventually have, I think we'd have it made. That's what some of those big cities, Atlanta and LA and Chicago and Nashville, they have. Maybe Nashville doesn't even have all that we have. And how do we play on that? But not necessarily make it all in downtown St. Louis. Maybe the basketball team could be built someplace in North St. Louis with a big arena that people would come to that could be really change that area pretty substantially. I think that we have the NGA, which is a fantastic place. I had no idea that they were here until I got invited to go on a visit. And when I saw what went on in that building, I thought, I love maps. I should have been a cartographer. I could have done it. I didn't even know something like that existed. And I think we have this amazing place that we need to open up more to when it gets open to the world to know what kind of possibilities are there from GIS was invented, for that. So it's wonderful. I think we have also tremendous arts here. Theater from little babies all the way up to adults. I love Broadway theater. I have been to New Broadway theater, but I love our theater. I love going to the Muni and the Fox and other stages all around St. Louis. We have really amazing talent. And I think you could be probably a more successful actor or actress in St. Louis than you might be able to be in New York, and much more appreciated. So I think that's one of the things we haven't blown up. The fact that artists can live here at an affordable price and also do their craft. We have amazing universities here. We have a lot. And having St. Louis U and Washington University and UMSL and Webster, any university you could possibly want, and they all have their own little specialty. We have the best healthcare. Having BJC here in St. Louis, medical research of Washington University. Right now, as we're sitting here, they are working on the cure for Alzheimer's and for cancers and for all kinds of things that are going to come out of St. Louis, that a lot have come out of St. Louis, but we don't brag about it. And I think that we need to be telling more people about the great science and work that's being done here. And it's not just WashU doctors or SLU doctors. They're working with doctors around the world to solve these problems. That's how we actually got to the COVID vaccine so quickly. And because we're in the center of the country, we have a really good feel for different lifestyles that I think some people who live only in the East Coast or only in the West Coast do. So I think we have a lot to offer that certainly has fueled me. I mean, I came here, I had to look up where St. Louis was on the map when the May company transferred me here. And then I looked at it and I said, oh, and I got here and I loved it and I didn't know anything about it. So, I really think that we don't do a good job of, it's not just a buzzword. It's not just STL made. It's not all these things. But, and that's another thing we have is a very, very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem for startups here that has been really growing. But we have to be able to fuel the other side of that startup, help them grow here so they don't have to go to another city to raise more money. That's one of our opportunities. But we have done a phenomenal job. Arch Grants, it doesn't exist anywhere else except St. Louis. I've talked to other young friends of mine that are entrepreneurs. I said, oh, look in your city and see if you have a version of Arch Grants. And I said, look it up. They look up Arch Grants and they go to their other cities and they don't see anything like it. It is really a brilliant future thinking. Jerry Schlichter and his team were thinking out into the future. And we are very fortunate to have all these young people here that are working hard on their businesses. They need more money, ultimately, when they take it to another level, but they also need our expertise of experienced people who can help guide them. And, everybody's busy, but, if you can spare a few hours for a young entrepreneur, you can make a huge difference from your own life experience. And I enjoy that. But I think we have, I could probably go on. I'm just sitting here thinking about all the things that we have. I'm not thinking about what we don't have. We don't have oceans. We're not on the ocean, but we're central. We can get there in a couple hours. It's not like a big deal on an airplane. You can go wherever you want. But we are very, very fortunate. And I think that we just need to be telling our story rather than complaining about ourselves. We do that really well. We need to be looking for the bright spots. Even if you don't like theater, you just know it's here, Even if you don't want to go to a soccer game, but you might want to go to a hockey game or a baseball game. Go enjoy it. It's so fun. And I don't go all those games. But I do go to the SLU basketball games and WashU basketball games. I love basketball. And I wish I'm working on that. That is another thing I could bring here. I don't have the wherewithal, but I would say that I'm talking it up. Hopefully somebody will pick up on it and say, yeah, we're going to have a professional basketball team here soon. Maybe it'll be women's basketball too.
Speak it into existence.
Yeah. Honestly, if you don't think about it, you aren't talking about it, you aren't wishing for it, it won't be. And half of it is the imagination. Willy Wonka, that's the kind of things that pop in my head. I think and not so much about the chocolate part of the factory, but what can we do? What can we build? What, the ideas are a dime a dozen. You have to have the passion and the will to go and do it. And I think not just one person, and not every project has to be as big as Delmar DivINe. There are lots of smaller buildings that could be redone into housing or office space or theater space. But I know it seems daunting, but it really is doable. If I can do it, I never built anything except plug and play in a mall. That was, I built ideas, but I haven't ever thought about something like this. And a friend of mine asked me yesterday, so what are you doing now? I hadn't talked to him in a while. And I said, see the picture behind me because it's my Zoom screen. And he said, oh my gosh, what got you into, what got you into the, and I said, people, the need, the why not, and you can think of a lot of reasons not to do something. And I didn't have the money to do the whole project. I didn't have that in my bank account, but you have to figure out the creative ways to make it work. And we did that.
That's wonderful. I think it's a great note to end on. Maxine, thank you so much for taking the time to share some thoughts, share some wisdom, and really share your vision. I think your vision has really shaped a lot of really great and impactful things here in St. Louis, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Hang tight. We'll be right back. This episode of the Biz STL podcast is supported by the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. On June 7th at Stiefel Theater, singer, composer, and TikTok star Cody Fry will make his SLSO debut in this Technicolor performance. The multi-talented artist will warm your heart with orchestral arrangements of his famous songs, including I Hear a Symphony and his Grammy-nominated cover of Eleanor Rigby. The St. Louis Children's Choirs will accompany Fry, adding 75 young choral voices to the symphonic pop performance. To purchase tickets and learn more about this show, visit slso.org. Thanks again to Maxine Clark for stopping by to chat with us today. So much there to chew on, so many ideas, so many great nuggets of wisdom that I hope will resonate with you. Just thinking about all of the opportunities that we have to capitalize on here in St. Louis is really exciting. Where would you start? What from our conversation spoke to you? Send me an email at mmiller@stlmag.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. That'll do it for this episode of the Biz STL podcast. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. And stay connected with us by subscribing to our Biz STL Leadership newsletter at stlmag.com/newsletters and follow along on Instagram at St. Louis Mag. If you loved what you heard, show us some love by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you choose to listen. We really appreciate your support and can't wait to have you join us again. Until then, I'm Mike Miller. See you next time.